Hey all, here OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a closer look at the DT Ultra 3. As the name kind of hints at, this is a Apple Watch Ultra clone or replica in a sense, which is a budget smartwatch that sells for only under $40. But despite the low price, it actually has a real AMOLED or OLED screen, which is pretty bright and vibrant, allowing you to access an always-on display mode, and also has 4 gigabytes of built-in storage that you can use to play back music, even hold back photos and videos on it, like an MP3 or MP4 player, and you can even pair wireless headphones directly to the watch, using it for music playback even without connecting to your smartphone, which is pretty cool to see. That being said, we have checked out another smartwatch from DT number 1 a few months back called the Watch X, which for all intensive purposes is quite similar to this Ultra 3 when it comes to the price point as well as feature set. It's just the shell which is different. The Watch X is more styled after the regular series of Apple Watches, as you can tell there, having more of a 2.5D curve to the glass, slightly smaller bezels there compared to the Ultra having that flattened design instead, plus the addition of an action key here on the side which can be used to quickly pull up sports that you're able to track, which is technically one button missing on the regular version of the Apple Watch. But aside from that key, I would say it's mostly a cosmetic difference between these two models. The screen, again, being surprisingly not bad for such a low-cost smartwatch, and there are plenty of UI elements which are kind of interesting to explore. I'll also mention that this watch comes in 2 versions. The base model here, which is again more cost effective at under $40, and there's also a slightly more premium model that has the same shell but actually runs on a full version of Android. This model is going to be even more feature stacked if you want to run Android APKs, and even has a SIM card slot that you can use to make calls, connect to internet, and also has built-in Wi-Fi in addition to a built-in camera, which are features missing on the regular base models, although the display and design from afar are going to be quite similar. By the way, the Android version also has built-in GPS, similar to on a smartphone, which is not going to be found on the base model. In my use, this one lasts around 5 days to a week before you have to recharge it again, depending on if you have always-on display mode on or off, compared to the Android version needs to be charged pretty much every single day. Another aspect that's kind of interesting about this base model is it claims to support some micro apps that you're able to install onto the watch itself that we'll take a closer look at later on, whether these claims are true or not. So it has slightly more expanded functionality, supposedly, compared to generations past. So here's a couple of examples that they provide as reference. But keep in mind that on the product pages, they still advertise it as 32 gigabits with a lowercase b, which converts to, again, around 4 gigabytes, more of the convention that we're used to on most other devices. It's kind of a tactic that they're trying to use to make that number seem larger, that I wish they would just stick to regular gigabytes, because even 4 GB is decent when it comes to holding some local files on the watch itself for a budget watch at the end of the day. It's still using the Wear Pro app that's compatible with both iOS and Android that we'll see later on in this video. You'll also find a quick user guide plus the charging and data sync cable, so you can connect this to your computer. It's recognized as a flash storage device similar to an SD card or thumb drive if you're trying to drag and drop files onto the 4 gigs of built-in storage. So taking a closer look at design, it definitely looks more expensive than the price would imply. We have kind of a metal trim here on the casing, making it feel nice and solid, unlike many other plastic watches that we have seen at a similar price point in the past, but that's also mostly true on their Watch X as well, which is also crafted out of aluminum unibody on the sides. The crown key here, by the way, also does actually rotate, so if you are in a menu, for example, you can swipe to go up and down through longer lists, which is good. There is a built-in microphone and speaker as well, just like on the Watch X, that you can use to answer phone calls if you are paired to your smartphone using Bluetooth. Just like the Apple Watch, straps here are removable just by pressing down and then sliding it out. For instance, there is another color here, which is more of a maybe typical sports band, as an alternative to the wavy style that we saw there from the beginning. And you also find on the rear a SpO2 blood oxygen monitor, along with a optical heart rate monitor, along with some of these screws here for accent, just to make it look a little bit more durable. But the actual ruggedness and IP nature of the watch is still the same as the Watch X, which is to say it's around IP67, rated against splashes, rain, and maybe a quick submersion. It can still survive, but it's not really advertised to go diving with the watch, which is one difference compared to the real Apple Watch Ultra, which of course has added endurance and ruggedness to withstand the extreme elements, which this model does not. So you're paying a bit more there for the military specifications compared to a normal watch that, of course, the replica version here does not give you, but the overall hardware still feels pretty solid, all things considered. Color of the strap can also be customized and otherwise feels quite comfortable as you're wearing it. Now taking a closer look at the UI next, it still is quite similar to what we saw on the Watch X, with support for gestures including covering up the screen with your palm to turn it off or go into the always on mode, as well as double tap to wake the screen, which is nice to see on such a low cost watch. We can swipe down to check out any notifications, as well as swipe up to check out some quick cards or widgets as shortcuts, similar to a real Apple Watch. So you can find, for instance, a real-time compass down below here, world clock, as well as some sleep data for the past night, including waking time, deep versus light sleep, as well as total time that you've slept. The weather widget has also been expanded to show a couple more views compared to past generation models. Aside from the current temperature, as well as a forecast of several days ahead, you can also loop through a couple other KPIs, including the probability of rainfall over the next hour, as well as the current wind speed, UV level, so if you should wear sunscreen or not, as well as the visibility in the air, humidity level, AQI, or the relative air quality will also be shown as well. Like before, you can pretty easily customize the watch faces or dials just by rotating it and tapping on it once. It also changed into a couple of other colors, which, as you can tell here, the OLED screen offering excellent viewing angles and pretty good brightness as well. Didn't have too many issues from a visibility point of view, with pretty symmetrical looking bezels as well. It is, again, one of the more impressive attributes, I would say, of this otherwise low-cost watch, having an excellent screen that is built on in. You can also find other digital as well as analog options here as well, just to serve as reference, including some animation style of videos which are looping along as well. And you can of course customize it with your own image as the background by using the companion app. Here's a couple of Snoopy inspired analog watch faces as well, which are also quite fun. Digital option can also be found, changing the color of the watch faces as well. And again, really showing the inky contrast because no pixels are being emitted when it's completely dark, thanks to the OLED nature. Here's a few other examples as well, all actually looking surprisingly quite nice. That one might be more inspired by a Amazfit. Here's a few more animations of some of the butterflies as well as flowers blooming there, making it feel like it's a bit more of a premium wearable. Anyways, we can loop through a carousel of widgets, including one here for daily activity status. The rings here will go all the way around once you've reached your current goal for calories, steps, and distance converted. And you can check out what points in the day you were a little bit more active, as well as any recent sports sessions that you've started to track. The crown key here also working pretty well. The overall UI seems to be fluid and responsive enough, surprisingly, for a budget wearable. The next tab over will track your heart rate. It can take automatic measurements throughout the day. You can change the duration, for example, every 10 minutes, every 30 minutes, so on and so forth, and see what your resting averages are like. And it works even as you are sleeping as well. It's not too slow either. Taking a measurement only takes around 5 seconds or so. That being said, the numbers I do find to be maybe a hair on the higher side compared to a more expensive wearable like an actual Apple Watch, but still gives you a rough approximation. Next one here for blood oxygen also takes around 15 seconds or so to get a measurement. Before we loop into a tab here for playing back music, you can use it as a wireless controller if connected to your phone, acting as just a Bluetooth remote, or play back music locally on the device's storage. By the way, on any of these cards, you're able to double tap to go into a carousel view to more quickly jump through into specific cards that you're interested in. This one here, by the way, is a voice assistant, but you have to be connected to your phone via Bluetooth. It just uses the microphone and speaker built into the watch, and you're able to leverage Google Assistant, as well as Gemini, ChatGPT, if you have those apps available on your smartphone. Now you can also swipe over here onto the main screen to jump into some of your recently opened apps, as well as jump into the Bluetooth dialer mode. Returning into the music player app, you can choose to read the local storage or again act as a remote. We're going to choose that, and you can click on database to check out all of the different tracks currently held on the system storage. There's some sample songs there. Tapping on pause there. So obviously it's not going to be as full sounding as on a smartphone speaker, but it does indeed function. You can use those controls. You can connect to wireless headphones or AirPods and listen to music that way as well. That being said, one limitation would be the file format support of the kind of limited hardware inside. Seems to work best if you're playing back MP3 or WMA tracks. For FLAC or lossless resolution tracks, which are too large in file size, actually may not play back necessarily. So just keep that in mind. But for basic MP3s and WMAs, still seems to function. Otherwise, if we tap on the bottom key here, you can also pull up a list of additional menu shortcuts, including being able to connect to, again, wireless headphones directly on the watch, as well as locate your connected smartphone by ringing a chime, turning on and off gestures including raise to wake the screen brightness modes, as well as a power saving mode, theater mode, as well as the ability for you to change between list versus that kind of honeycomb pattern if you're trying to loop through the full list of applications. The vibration motor intensity can also be adjusted, as well as a flashlight mode that changes the entire screen white, red, for instance, to illuminate objects a little bit better if you're in the dark, as well as having built-in NFC, so you can activate any cards that you want to store directly on here for unlocking maybe doors as well as vehicles, and you can program that using the companion app, which is also nice to see found on a basic smartwatch. Some of these cards and tiles, for instance, you can also remove if you're not commonly using those features to make it a little bit more minimalistic. Otherwise, we can jump into the full list of applications by tapping on the crown key, and we aren't able to necessarily zoom in and out of these apps like on a real Apple Watch, but it kind of just slides up and down, but still seems to be surprisingly quite responsive from a UI point of view. Nothing feels too slow or choppy. And when it comes to the new feature of being able to install additional micro apps, it is actually functional if you enable it on your smartphone. For example, once you are paired via Bluetooth, you're able to access features including a translation app. There is a Google Maps app here as well, even BBC News. So you're able to take a look at some trending articles, and on here it seems like the crown isn't necessarily reactive, so maybe some optimization can still be done here, but you are able to tap inside and have a closer look at the main takeaway of that article, again loading the data over from your phone or connected device. This is pretty cool because it's a feature that was once reserved for more expensive smartwatches, including Android Wear. Apple Watches obviously have a third-party app store that you can download more apps onto, as well as Amazfit even introduced its own micro app store. But now that we have it on a ultra budget watch like this is pretty neat. So here are a couple more examples, including a translator app, although it seems like the number of languages are still a little bit limited only to Chinese and English at this moment. Hello, this is a test. Give it a quick example here, and you can tell that it then becomes translated into Chinese. And here's the Google Maps app also running on this smartwatch. Again, you have to connect to your phone, but if your device is in your pocket, you can search these features, check out nearby restaurants, shopping, coffee, even metro info, as you can see here. So even though it's not going to be the fastest because it is still relying on your connection to relay the information back and forth, it can take a couple of seconds. You can even begin a navigation route either by walking or driving, and it does in fact function as well, updating itself once you are actually moving. So it is pretty cool to have this view available now on this budget smartwatch. And you do get voice prompts spoken out loud as well that tells you to then turn once you are actually on the move. Also, searching points of interest tends to work decently, relying on voice input for search. A couple of additional apps here include a AI watch face generator that can create custom images based on the prompts that you speak out loud. For example, vibrant sunset image, taking around 20 seconds or so. And there we have it. That's the AI generated photo with the description of a colorful sunset. It actually looks quite good. We can tap on apply and has now become our custom background wallpaper for the smartwatch. You can even find a ChatGPT application here as well, again using voice input. Hello, who are you? So I've asked it to summarize what are the main features of the new Apple Watch, and there we have it. It's actually generating at a pretty decent speed, as you can tell here, using ChatGPT. You can even tap for it to be spoken out loud. Here's another travel-related micro app, although it feels a little bit redundant because many of these features can also be found directly in the Google Maps app that we saw there earlier. It's basically just showing you points of interest which are nearby, including restaurants, as well as attractions, hotels, things like that, which you can already find in that previous app as well. It's not like it's giving you a virtual tour of a museum or telling you the top recommended attractions in the area, nothing like that. It's more just points of interest, but still neat to have as a free app, I guess. So hopefully that gives you a quick idea of some of the types of micro apps that you can expect available on the watch. Because it's still a budget wearable at the end of the day, and I doubt there will be many third-party app developers beyond what they have created themselves. But still, again, a handful of extra features can be found. You can see if there's any updates for the App Store even, as well as all the ones that we demoed there from earlier, including Google Maps, ChatGPT client. It's nice that they are adding a bit more support though. It looks like there is one new app that has been since added, which is AI Notes. Actually not too bad when it comes to installation speed. And we can go back into the full list and find that app now at the very bottom. Clicking on this, it looks like we're able to categorize several notes by either for work, life, or studying. Hello, this is a quick example test of the Notes app. How does it work? And after a couple of seconds, it should have transcription capabilities or voice to text. As you can tell, there's still no keyboard option that you get, but at least you are able to record some quick notes or thoughts, jot them down on the watch itself, and save it using the 4 gigs of built-in storage. So again, the voice to text transcription capabilities are at least nice to find here, complementing the voice recorder app that you now have available just on your wrist. And again, to leverage the App Store functionality and additional micro apps, all you have to do is go over to the Device tab on the app and turn on the network sharing so that the watch has permission to use the Wi-Fi or cellular data on your connected device. So with this turned on, you'll be able to then download the apps on the watch, as well as to use, again, Google Maps or navigation, things like that, once tethered to your device. So the addition of those micro apps is actually pretty cool, and indeed functions actually better than I was expecting. If they can continue adding even more micro apps down the road, it could become even more versatile. But it's already a nice start compared to almost all the other budget smartwatches I've seen previously. Really had no additional app store of any kind. All the apps built into the watch when you took it out of the box was all you received. But on here, you're able to actually download a few more, play around with it a little bit, making it feel like more of a true smartwatch compared to just a fitness tracker. You can also find other tiles here for meditation and breathing, relaxation, using the haptic vibration motors. You'll also find typical functions, including a timer as well as a stopwatch on here, which all have a pretty attractive UI on this OLED screen. You can even find a basic voice recorder on here as well. This is a quick test, 1, 2, 3, which is actually not bad for just some quick memos that you may want to capture. You can also set up alarms directly on the watch itself and also jump into some images. So here are some sample photos as well as one that I sent over from the phone. You can zoom in and out using the crown key as well. So if you want to store some basic memories of friends and family, for instance, you can do so using the built-in storage as well. Again, I think this takes good advantage of this large 2-inch AMOLED screen, showing off the vibrancy of the colors that it's capable of reproducing. Other quick functions include a basic calendar you can also find here, but there are no notification support built into the default app. A basic calculator can also be found here. The aforementioned compass as well, which by the way can also show a couple of other kind of visualizations or views. Case in point, you can tap here to go into a darker theme that also shows the elevation as well. So it also acts as a basic barometer, which is really not bad. You can also find down below here the ability to play back some demo video clips. MP4 and AVI will function just fine, but of course a very small screen at the end of the day, kind of taking me back to the days of MP3 and MP4 players. Additional quick shortcuts more than anything to Facebook, Twitter, or X. If you get some incoming notifications, they'll be passed along here. Additionally, you can check out some world times, for example, what time it currently is in various locales around the world, and be able to track that more quickly at a glance, in addition to check out a decibel meter that's using the microphone here to pick up the sound around you, which is one new app that we haven't seen previously on the other Watch X. And you can even sync some of your contact information as well as payment info from other popular shopping platforms in Asia, for instance, WeChat, Alipay, plus contacts that you can store from Instagram, WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, so on and so forth. The final tab here is going to be the games, and on here the number of titles has also slightly expanded compared to on past generation watches. We have some classics including Snake, so this of course was also found in retro Nokia phones of yesteryear, but you can use the touchscreen here to navigate, eat these different fruit pieces. As the snake grows progressively longer, the game becomes a little bit more challenging. We can exit out of that. There's also a basic version of Flappy Bird that can also be triggered on the watch here. Not bad, although the animations may seem a little bit slower compared to the smartphone counterpart, it still is surprisingly quite playable. We've also got Tower of Hanoi, so it's a classic kind of puzzle or strategy game where the smaller pieces have to fit over the larger ones, and you have to try to complete all the pieces moving it to the right in as few moves as possible. Color blind test is kind of a reaction test that tells you how quickly you can press on the square that is not the same color as the other ones. And you can also find the classic 2048 kind of calculation type game of stacking the tiles together to reach the aforementioned 2048. The two new titles here would be Buddha Beads and the Beat Wooden Fish, kind of bizarre names, but they're more kind of meditation style apps more than anything, where you can swipe in either orientation, almost like you have a virtual bead in your hands that you're trying to pray with if you're in a temple, for example. as a way to perhaps relax, or it can be thought of as a counter app that kind of goes up every time that you click on it, as you can tell there, and there's some special sound effects as well. Now, touching on the performance of the activity tracking in a little bit more detail, I would say the pedometer so far seems to be decently calibrated. It's using the accelerometer or gravity sensor in conjunction with data that you enter from the companion app, such as your height and weight, for it to better calibrate the intensity of the motion to correlate with the step. Some of your emergency contact info will also be synced over from the phone over to the watch. So you can also save info like your blood type, for instance. If you are in an emergency, someone can open up that profile card info. Overall, the, again, step counting seems to be reasonable, in line with what we saw on the Watch X, which is to say, not too far off from an actual Apple Watch or an Amazfit smartwatch. Thankfully, that metric doesn't seem to be too overestimated, and shaking the watch doesn't really trigger a step. You have to be really walking, and after taking about 100 steps or so, it mostly was counting around 95 steps in my testing, so not bad. And similarly, when it comes to your sleep tracking, I would say that the number of hours slept is also not shabby. However, it doesn't have 24/7 continuous automatic sleep tracking, meaning if you're taking a nap at noon, for instance, it may not detect and recognize that as sleep. It's only working at the nighttime hours, which is still a distinction found in the software of more expensive premium smartwatches. But again, under regular nighttime hours, I would say it's not too far off when it comes to proportion of light versus deep sleep, and still is useful to track at a glance. Again, for sports and activity tracking, it will be counting your steps, as well as calories, as well as heart rate fluctuations second per second instead of longer durations like between every X minutes. So it's going to consume a little bit more power and be a bit more accurate if you want to track, let's say, 10 minutes, 30 minutes as performing a specific workout. However, keep in mind that there is, again, no built-in GPS, unlike the actual Watch Ultra that's trying to imitate. So you can use connected GPS by pairing via Bluetooth to your phone and using your phone to track your location on a map, for instance, or consider the Android-powered version that has that built-in GPS chip. Still, you have a pretty decent selection of different sports that you're able to label at the very least, and be able to better categorize and look at later on what types of activities you were performing at the time. Last but not least, under more advanced settings, you can change the transition type when you are flipping between different screens, kind of like a launcher of sorts. The system language can also be changed here between Chinese, English, French, Spanish, Japanese, so on and so forth. And under display properties is where you can turn on and off the always on display mode, as well as find a few other styles between analog or digital, depending on your preferences, or you can turn it completely off to consume less power. So some of those properties can be found, plus activating the mass storage mode, you can tap here for it to be recognized as a flash storage device when plugged into a computer. Now, last but not least, there is an SOS mode that you can set up for some emergency contact info. So when powering on and off the watch, you're able to activate the emergency SOS if you're connected to your phone, as well as activate a louder siren that will blast out a chime using the speaker, as some extra accessibility or safety functions, which is not bad. Now coming to the aforementioned Wear Pro app, it is one that we have seen on other generic smartwatches in the past, but there have been some subsequent UI updates to add a few more features. It is relatively quick to pair and connect once you have Bluetooth and location services turned on, drag down to refresh the data, and on the phone screen you are able to check out stats with a little bit more granularity, more easily see different periods when you were a bit more active, as well as change your goals. Other tiles, including heart rate, will also tell you a bit more stats, whether you're in a good or healthy zone or not. And for sleep, it will also assign you a score if it was good versus poor, depending on the number of disturbances you had and time that you spent in the different zones. In our particular case, we went to sleep too late and maybe didn't sleep enough hours, so it contributed to a lower score, as you can tell there. So you can gauge how those patterns will change over time using the app. However, it doesn't provide you with as much granularity when it comes to insights for things like steps, for instance, compared to a Fitbit or an actual Apple Watch, which has more advanced analytics and reports. But still, the data does get synced over without too many problems. The exercise tab allows you to also start sessions directly from the phone side. And to their credit, it looks like there's quite a few free courses that you're able to find for things like stretching, as well as fat burning, various different strength training small courses that will provide you with a kind of quick tutorial video before it begins, telling you the proper posture to begin that particular activity, and then tracking your workout whenever you click on start from the phone. And this is where things get a little bit messy, because on the very top you can find a tab for Discover to look at even more activities for working out, yoga, in addition to some sleep tracks that you can use to unwind and relax, meditate, as well as calm down, which I think are good ideas on a smartwatch like this. It certainly is more features from a software perspective compared to generations past. But the main tab here, which is entertainment, I think is kind of on the side of advertisement or bloatware, including fortune telling, which is really just a link to a website for a mini game. I mean, it works, but there's no real interaction or relationship with the actual smartwatch. It doesn't use the motion sensors to track the game or anything like that. It's more like an advertisement spot more than anything. So in a perfect world, I would say they can probably remove this tab, but I guess it's one way for them to make a bit of money since the app is otherwise free and the watch itself is really low cost. There is no subscription required either to access the majority of the course content, which is pretty good to see. Now there's also some, again, news tile information down below here, so it is getting a little bit more complicated compared to past revisions of the app. But there we have it, some more features. And then finally, under the device tab, you're able to change the watch face or dial, and to their credit, again, there is a pretty large selection that you're able to find, the majority which are free. You can go between various analog and digital options, quite ornate, to take advantage of the excellent looking AMOLED display and find more options to push over. Under custom is where you're able to set your own background image as well as even videos that you can create as a loop. And we have the typical notification management, transferring photos over wirelessly to the watch, although again, for transferring music, you still have to use the connected USB cable. There is no music transfer tab at the moment. You can also change some of the NFC properties, wallet properties, and notifications for things like if you've been sitting down for too long, drinking water, and whether you want the continuous heart rate monitoring to be on or off, consuming less power, as well as the frequency of those measurements can also be set from here, plus check if there's any firmware updates. Last but not least, basic properties like goals, such as steps, as well as your basic profile info can also be set on the last tab. So for sub $40, it's honestly not bad. As long as you understand some of the constraints, it still is more of a basic smartwatch with just a elevated screen now here in the current generation with decent tracking for basic fitness activities. You can check out more details if interested in the links down below. A pretty interesting wearable nonetheless, showing some increasing ambitions on DT number one's part. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That has been the DT number one Ultra 3 budget smartwatch.